Trust is like a beehive, delicate, intricate, built on patterns you believe will hold. But what happens when the hum of that trust turns to silence and the life you tended crumbles? This is a story of love, betrayal, and a man who learned truth stings worse than any bee. My name is Calvin, 52 years old, a beekeeper living in the rolling hills of rural Vermont. My life has always been tied to the land, to the rhythm of seasons and the soft hum of my hives. There's something sacred about bees, how they work together, each one knowing its role, building something greater than itself. For years, I thought my life was like that hive, orderly, purposeful, steady. I've got 30 hives spread across a meadow behind our old farmhouse, each one a little world I tend with care. The bees don't lie to you. They don't hide their intentions. If you respect their rules, they reward you with honey, golden and sweet, like a promise kept. I've lived in this small town my whole life, born and raised on the same dirt roads where my parents taught me to drive. It's the kind of place where folks wave from their porches, where the county fair is the biggest event of the year. My wife, Rosemary, and I built our life here. We've been married 22 years, and I thought we were solid, like the oak table in our kitchen where we'd share coffee every morning. Rosemary's got this laugh, bright, like wind chimes on a summer evening, that could pull me out of any dark mood. She'd sit with me after long days, her hands smelling of lavender from her garden, talking about the future, our plans to expand the apiary, maybe travel to see the ocean again. I trusted her like I trusted the bees to return to their hives. Our life wasn't perfect, money was tight sometimes. Beekeeping doesn't make you rich, winters could be brutal, and we'd lost a few hives to cold snaps or mites. But we faced it together. Rosemary handled the books, sold our honey at the farmer's market, and charmed every customer with her smile. I'd watch her from across the stall, proud, thinking how lucky I was to have her as my partner. We didn't have kids, never quite happened for us, but we had each other, and that felt like enough. My cousin Dale was part of our world too. He's family, the kind you don't think twice about. Dale's a few years younger, a mechanic who'd drop by for Sunday dinners, help fix my old truck, or join us at the fair. He teased Rosemary about her gardening, and she'd fire back with some quip that made us all laugh. I never saw anything wrong with their banter. Why would I? Dale was blood, and Rosemary was my heart. I trusted them both. That trust held me together until 3 months ago, when it all fell apart. I was in the meadow, checking a hive for signs of a new queen, when a neighbor's kid, Timmy, rode up on his bike. He's 15, always poking around with his phone, taking pictures of the bees for some school project. Calvin, he said, holding out his phone. You see this? I squinted at the screen, expecting another blurry shot of my hives. Instead, it was a photo of Rosemary and Dale, arm in arm at the county fair last summer, the fair I thought she'd skipped because she said she was visiting her sister in Burlington. My stomach dropped. Timmy's face went red when he saw my expression. I thought you knew, he mumbled, pedaling off before I could say a word. I stood there, the hum of the bees deafening in my ears. The phone's image burned into my mind. Rosemary's smile in that photo wasn't the one she gave me. It was different, secret, alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was there, sharp as a sting. That night, I waited for her to come home. The kitchen was quiet, the air thick with the scent of honey from jars on the counter. When she walked in, her laugh faded as she saw my face. Calvin, what's wrong? She asked, setting down her bag. I held up my phone. The photo's still open. Her eyes widened, and for the first time in 22 years, I saw something in her I didn't recognize. Fear. I stood in our kitchen, the photo of Rosemary and Dale glaring from my phone. The air felt heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks over the Vermont hills. Rosemary's face crumpled as she stared at the screen, her hands trembling as she set her bag on the counter. Calvin, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of my own pulse. Let me explain. Explain, I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. 10 years, Rosemary, that's what Timmy said. A decade. The words felt like they were scraping my throat raw. I didn't want to believe it, but the truth was in her eyes, guilt, plain as the wax cappings I'd scrape off a honeycomb. She sank into a chair, covering her face with her hands, and I just stood there, waiting for something to make sense. She started talking, her voice shaky, like she was trying to piece together a story she didn't fully understand herself. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said. It started at the fair. Years ago, you were so busy with the hives, and Dale, he was there, listening. She looked up, her eyes wet. It was a mistake, Calvin, a stupid, lonely mistake. But it grew, grew. I repeated, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. Into what? A second life? You and Dale, sneaking around behind my back for 10 years. I wanted her to deny it, to say Timmy got it wrong, that the photo was a fluke, but she just nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. I didn't know how to stop it, she said. I didn't want to hurt you. Hurt me. Those words hit like a kick to the chest. I thought of all the evenings we'd spent together, her laughing over coffee, planning our future, while she was carrying this secret. I thought of Dale, sitting at our table, eating my food, joking like he was my brother. The betrayal wasn't just hers, it was his, too, my own cousin, someone I'd known since we were kids chasing fireflies in these same fields. I didn't yell. I wanted to, but my voice came out quiet, cold. Get out, I said. She froze, like she hadn't heard me right. Calvin, please, she started, but I shook my head. Not you, Dale. He's not welcome here anymore. She nodded, like she understood, but I could see the weight of it settling on her. I didn't know what to do about us yet. My head was too tangled. But Dale? He was done. The next day, I called him. He picked up, his voice all casual, like nothing was wrong. Hey, Cal, what's up? I didn't waste words. I know about you and Rosemary. You're not family anymore. Don't come near my house. There was a long pause, then a weak, Calvin, I'm sorry, before I hung up. Sorry didn't fix a decade of lies. I couldn't face the hives after that. For weeks, I let them sit untended, something I'd never done in 20 years of beekeeping. The bees didn't care about my broken heart. They kept working, building, buzzing. But every time I stepped into the meadow, I saw Rosemary's smile in that photo, Dale's arm around her. The hives felt tainted, like the honey inside was poisoned by what I knew. I let a few colonies swarm, losing them to the woods. It was reckless, but I didn't care. My whole life felt like it was swarming away. I started sleeping in the guest room, avoiding Rosemary's eyes across the breakfast table. She tried to talk, to explain more, but I couldn't hear it. Every word felt like another sting. I kept thinking about the patterns I'd trusted, the way she'd kiss me goodnight, the way Dale would clap me on the shoulder. All of it was a lie, as fragile as a comb left too long in the sun. I'd spent years tending my hives, believing order meant truth, but it doesn't. You can tend something with all your heart, and it still falls apart. The worst part wasn't just the betrayal, it was how it changed me. I started questioning everything. Was Rosemary ever happy with me? Did Dale laugh behind my back every time we shared a beer? The bees were the only thing that didn't lie, but even they couldn't fix the ache in my chest. I was 52, and my life felt like a hive stripped bare. The days after I confronted Rosemary blurred into a haze, like fog settling over the Vermont hills. I'd wake up in the guest room, the bed creaking under me, and lie there staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together what my life was now, the farmhouse. Once warm with Rosemary's laughter and the smell of her lavender soap, felt like a hollow shell. I'd shuffle to the kitchen for coffee, avoiding her eyes as she sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug like it was an anchor. We didn't talk much. What was there to say? Her apologies felt like echoes, bouncing off walls I'd built around myself. I stopped going to the hives altogether. That meadow, where I'd spent decades learning the language of bees, felt like a graveyard of trust. I'd always found peace there, listening to their hum, watching them dance their waggle patterns. Bees don't betray you. They follow their instincts, predictable and honest. But now, every time I thought about pulling on my suit and lifting a frame, I saw that photo of Rosemary and Dale, their smiles slicing through me. I let the hive sit, neglected. The frames heavy with untended honey. I knew I was risking everything. Mites could take hold, or the colonies could weaken. But part of me didn't care. If my marriage could collapse after 22 years, what was the point of saving a few bees? The town noticed, in a place like this, where everyone knows your business. My absence from the farmer's market raised eyebrows. Mrs. Larson, who ran the general store, cornered me one morning when I stopped in for gas. Calvin, where's your honey this year? She asked, her eyes sharp with concern. I mumbled something about a bad season and left before she could dig deeper. The truth was too raw to share. I couldn't stand the thought of their pity, or worse, their gossip. Rosemary still went to the market. selling what little stock we had left, but I couldn't bring myself to join her. The idea of standing beside her, pretending we were still a team, made my skin crawl. Dale's absence left a hole too. He'd been a fixture at family gatherings, Thanksgiving at my sister's, summer barbecues in our backyard. Now, my sister, Ellen, kept calling, asking why Dale wasn't answering her texts. I didn't tell her the truth. How do you say your cousin's been sleeping with your wife for a decade? Instead, I dodged her questions, let the silence grow. Ellen wasn't stupid, though. She showed up at the farmhouse one evening, her pickup crunching on the gravel drive. Calvin, what's going on? She demanded, hands on her hips. I wanted to tell her, to let the anger spill out, but I just shook my head. It's complicated, I said, and she left, frustrated, her tail lights fading into the dusk. Rosemary tried to bridge the gap. She'd leave notes on the counter, simple things like, I made soup, it's in the fridge, or, I'm sorry, Calvin, can we talk? I'd read them, then crumple them up. Talking felt like stepping into a trap. What could she say that would undo 10 years of lies? I kept replaying her words from that night. It grew. Like their affair was some wildflower she couldn't help but water. I wondered what I'd missed. Late nights she said she was at her sister's. Weekends Dale was just helping out. The signs were there, but I'd been too busy tending hives, too trusting to see them. At night, I'd sit on the porch, the darkness thick with the scent of pine and earth. The bees were out there, working in their quiet way, but I felt like a stranger to them. I built my life on order, on the belief that if you worked hard, followed the patterns, things would hold together. But now I saw cracks everywhere. Rosemary's betrayal wasn't just about her and Dale, it was about me, too. I'd been so sure of my life, so proud of our little world, that I'd missed the rot beneath it. The bees didn't lie, but I lied to myself, believing love and loyalty were as steady as their hum. I started wondering who I was without that trust. Was I still Calvin, the beekeeper who could coax honey from a hive? Or was I just a fool, 52 years old, starting over with nothing but a broken heart and a meadow full of ghosts? The weeks dragged on, each one heavier than the last. The farmhouse felt like a museum of a life I didn't live anymore. Every corner held memories of Rosemary's laughter, our shared dreams, now tainted by what I knew. I'd wake up in the guest room, the mattress sagging under me, and listen to the quiet. No hum of bees, no clatter of Rosemary in the kitchen, just silence, thick and suffocating, like the air before a Vermont storm. I kept my distance from her, eating meals alone, leaving the house. Before she woke, it was easier to avoid her than to face the questions piling up in my head. Why didn't I see it? Was I not enough? I couldn't avoid the highs forever, though. One morning, about a month after that photo turned my world upside down, I forced myself to pull on my beekeeper's suit. The fabric felt foreign, like it belonged to someone else. I grabbed my smoker and tools, the weight of them familiar but heavy in my hands. The meadow was quiet, the grass brittle from early fall frost. The hives stood like sentinels, their wooden boxes weathered but proud. I approached the first one, my heart pounding. I didn't know what I expected. Maybe for the bees to sense my anger, to turn on me like everything else had. But they didn't. I lit the smoker, the pine needles curling into gray wisps, and cracked open the hive. The bees moved with their usual purpose, their hum steady, indifferent to my chaos. I checked the frames, expecting disaster after weeks of neglect. Some were heavy with honey, others showed signs of stress, empty cells, a few dead bees scattered at the bottom. It wasn't as bad as I'd feared, but it wasn't good either. I'd let them down, just like I'd let myself down by trusting Rosemary and Dale so blindly. Working the hives brought a flicker of calm, but it didn't last. Every buzz reminded me of the life I thought I had, orderly, predictable, built on trust. I kept seeing Rosemary's face in that photo. Her arm looped through Dale's like they were the ones who'd built this life together. I slammed a frame back into place too hard, and the bees stirred, their hum rising to a warning. I stepped back, muttering an apology they couldn't hear. They didn't care about my pain, but they still needed me. That stung worse than anything, knowing I had to keep going, even when I felt like giving up. Back at the house, Rosemary was trying harder to reach me. She'd leave dinners covered in foil, little gestures that felt like bribes. One night, I found a plate of meatloaf, my favorite, waiting with a note. I know you're hurting. I'm here when you're ready. I ate alone, the food tasteless, and tossed the note in the trash. I wasn't ready. I didn't know if I ever would be, but her presence was everywhere. Her gardening gloves on the porch, her lavender soap in the bathroom. I couldn't escape her. And that made me angrier. She'd broken us, but she was still here, acting like we could stitch it back together. The town was starting to whisper. I saw it in the sidelong glances at the gas station, the way conversations stopped when I walked into the diner. My sister, Ellen, came by again, this time with a thermos of coffee and a stubborn look. "Calvin, you look like hell," she said, sitting on the porch steps. "What's going on with you? And Rosemary? And where's Dale?" I wanted to tell her, to let the truth spill out like honey from a cracked jar. But I couldn't. "Not yet. It's personal," I said, my voice flat. She sighed, her eyes searching mine. "You're my brother, Cal. Don't shut me out." I promised I'd talk soon, but I didn't mean it. "How do you explain that your wife and your cousin build a secret life behind your back?" That night, I sat in the dark, the weight of it all pressing down. I'd spent my life tending things, hives, a marriage, a family, thinking care was enough to keep them whole. But care doesn't stop betrayal. It doesn't stop the people you love from carving out pieces of you. I was 52, and I didn't know who I was anymore, just a man with empty frames, trying to find a reason to keep tending what was left. The meadow became my refuge again, even if it was a reluctant one. I couldn't abandon the bees forever, not without losing the last piece of myself that still made sense. Each morning, I drag myself out of the guest room before dawn, pull on my beekeeper suit, and head to the hives. The routine was a lifeline, fragile but real. The bees didn't judge me. They didn't care about the mess my life had become. They just kept working, their hum a steady reminder that some things still followed. Their patterns, even if my world didn't. I started small, checking frames, clearing out dead bees, adding sugar syrup to weaker hives. The work was slow, deliberate, like piecing together a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Some colonies were struggling, their numbers thin from my neglect. I felt a pang of guilt every time I lifted a frame and saw empty cells where brood should have been. I'd let them down, too wrapped up in my own hurt to do my job. But the bees didn't hold grudges. They let me back in, and that small mercy kept me going. At home, things with Rosemary were a different kind of struggle. We lived like ghosts in the same house, passing each other with polite nods or mumbled words. She'd stopped leaving notes, maybe sensing they only made me angrier. But she was still there, cooking meals I barely ate, tending her garden like nothing had changed. I hated how normal she seemed, like she could just carry on while I was unraveling. One evening, I found her in the kitchen, kneading dough for bread, her hands dusted with flour. "Calvin," she said softly, "can we try counseling? I want to fix this." I looked at her, the woman I'd loved for 22 years, and felt nothing but a hollow ache. "Fix what?" I said. "You had a whole other life." She flinched, but I walked away before she could respond. The town's whispers were getting louder. I overheard a couple of guys at the diner talking about trouble at the Miller place. They shut up when they saw me, but the damage was done. I knew the rumors were spreading, probably fueled by Dale's absence and my grim face at the market. My sister, Ellen, wouldn't let it go either. She showed up again, this time with a casserole and a look that said she wasn't leaving without answers. We sat on the porch, the air crisp with fall, and she didn't waste time. "Calvin, I know something's wrong. Dale's dodging me, and you're acting like a stranger. Talk to me." I almost lied again, but the weight of it was too much. "Rosemary and Dale," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "They've been together for 10 years. Ellen's face went pale, her hands gripping the casserole dish. "10 years," she repeated, like she couldn't believe it. I nodded, staring at the meadow in the distance. "I found out from a kid's phone, a picture from the fair." Ellen cursed under her breath, something she rarely did. "I'm so sorry, Cal. Why didn't you tell me?" I shrugged. "Didn't want you to look at me like I was broken." She reached for my hand, but I pulled back. I didn't want pity. Not from her, not from anyone. Ellen stayed for a while, promising to keep it quiet, but I knew she'd confront Dale. Part of me wanted her to, wanted him to feel the weight of what he'd done, but another part just wanted to forget he existed. That night, I sat by the hives, the stars sharp above the meadow. I'd brought a lantern, its glow catching the edges of the wooden boxes. I thought about the bees, how they'd rebuild even after a swarm, how they'd start over with what was left. I wasn't sure I could do that. My life felt like a cracked comb, still holding some shape, but leaking everything it was meant to contain. Rosemary's betrayal had taken more than my trust. It had taken the man I thought I was. I'd spent years tending our marriage, believing love was enough to keep it strong. But love doesn't stop secrets. It doesn't stop someone from choosing someone else. At 52, I was left wondering if I'd ever trust anything or anyone again. The highs were starting to feel like home again, or at least the closest thing I had to one. Each morning, I'd lose myself in the rhythm of checking frames, scraping wax, listening to the bees hum. It wasn't just about saving the colonies anymore. It was about saving myself. The meadow was the only place where the world made sense, where I could focus on something other than the hole in my chest. But even there, the betrayal followed me. I'd catch myself staring at a honeycomb, wondering how I'd missed the cracks in my own life, how I'd let 10 years of lies build up like wax in a neglected hive. Rosemary and I were barely speaking now. She'd stopped trying to leave notes or cook my favorite meals, maybe realizing they only pushed me further away. We moved around each other like strangers sharing a house, her footsteps soft on the creaky floorboards. My eyes fixed on anything but her face. I'd catch glimpses of her in the garden, pulling weeds with a focus that felt forced, like she was trying to prove she was still the woman I'd married. But she wasn't, not to me. The Rosemary I loved wouldn't have built a secret life with my cousin while I was out tending bees. The town's gossip was relentless. I'd hear whispers at the market, Calvin's not himself, something's off with the Millers. I ignored them, but it was harder when my sister, Ellen, got involved. She confronted Dale, just like I knew she would. She called me one evening, her voice tight with anger. I saw him at his shop, she said. He wouldn't look me in the eye. Said he's sorry. But I told him sorry doesn't cut it. I could hear the hurt in her voice, not just for me but for our family, fractured by Dale's betrayal. You want me to do anything, Cal? She asked. I told her no, but the truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. Then Dale showed up. It was a cold morning, the kind where your breath hangs in the air. I was in the meadow, checking a hive for signs of mites, when I heard his truck rumble down the drive. My stomach twisted, but I kept working, hoping he'd leave. He didn't. I heard his boots crunching on the frost-covered grass. Then his voice, low and hesitant. Calvin, can we talk? I didn't turn around, just kept prying a frame loose, the bees buzzing around me. Nothing to say, I said, my voice steady but cold. He stepped closer, and I could feel his eyes on me. I messed up, Cal. I know I did. It wasn't supposed to. I cut him off, finally facing him. 10 years, Dale, you looked me in the face for 10 years, ate at my table, and lied. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't mean to hurt you, he said. It just happened. I laughed. A bitter sound that startled the bees. Happened? You chose it. Every day, you chose it. I wanted to hit him, to let the anger pour out, but I didn't. Instead, I pointed to the road. Get off my land. Don't come back. He nodded, like he'd expected it, and walked away. I watched his truck disappear, the dust settling like the end of something I couldn't name. It didn't feel good, but it felt necessary, like cutting out a diseased frame to save the hive. Back at the house, Rosemary was waiting. She'd seen Dale's truck from the window, and her face was pale, her eyes red. Did he come to apologize? She asked, her voice trembling. I nodded, not trusting myself to say more. She took a step toward me, then stopped. Calvin, I know I broke us, but I love you. I want to try. Her words hung there, fragile as a comb ready to collapse. I looked at her, really looked, and saw the woman I'd loved for decades, and the stranger who'd betrayed me. I don't know if I can, I said, and walked past her to the guest room. That night, I lay awake, the hum of the bees echoing in my mind. I'd spent my life building things, hives, a marriage, a home, thinking they'd last if I worked hard enough. But some things can't be fixed, no matter how much you try. I was starting to see that. And it scared me more than the betrayal itself. The days started to blur into a new kind of routine, one I didn't choose but couldn't avoid. I'd wake before the sun, pull on my beekeeper suit, and head to the meadow. The hives were my anchor now. The only place where I could breathe without the weight of Rosemary's betrayal pressing down. The bees didn't ask questions or offer apologies. They just kept building, their hum a quiet promise that life goes on, even when it's broken. I'd spend hours checking frames, cleaning out debris, watching. The queens lay eggs in perfect hexagons. It was slow work, but it felt like stitching myself back together, one small task at a time. I'd lost 3 colonies to my neglect, their boxes empty except for a few stragglers. It hurt to see, like losing pieces of my past. But the surviving hives were stronger than I'd expected. I started to see them differently. Not just as work, but as a mirror. The bees didn't dwell on their losses. They rebuilt, adapted, kept going. I wasn't sure I could do the same, but I wanted to try. I started harvesting honey again, bottling it in the old glass jars Rosemary and I used to label together. I didn't let her help this time. The jars felt like mine now, a small claim to something I could still control. At home, the silence between me and Rosemary was deafening. We'd stopped pretending things could go back to normal. She'd moved her things to the spare bedroom, leaving our old room to me. It felt wrong, sleeping in the bed we'd shared for 22 years, but I couldn't stay in the guest room forever. Every night, I'd lie there, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd ever feel anything but anger and loss. Her lavender soap still lingered in the bathroom, a ghost of the life we'd had. I thought about throwing it out, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. One evening, I came home from the hives to find Rosemary sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of papers in front of her. She looked up, her eyes tired but steady. "Calvin," she said, "I think we need to talk about what's next." My heart sank, but I nodded, sitting across from her. The table felt like a canyon between us. "I've been thinking about leaving," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not because I don't love you, but because I see what I've done to you. You deserve better than this." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted her gone, wanted the constant reminder of her betrayal out of my life. But another part, the part that remembered her laugh, our quiet evenings, the way she'd hum while bottling honey, wanted to fight for what we'd had. "Where would you go?" I asked, my voice rough. She shrugged, looking at her hands. "Maybe my sister's in Burlington. I don't know. I can't keep hurting you by staying." I leaned back, the chair creaking under me. "You think leaving fixes this? 10 years, Rosemary. You and Dale. You don't get to just walk away and call it even." She flinched, but she didn't argue. "I'm not trying to fix it," she said. "I know I can't. I just want you to have a chance to heal." Her words hit hard, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. I wasn't healing. Not with her here, not with the past hanging over us like a storm cloud. I didn't give her an answer that night. I needed time, something I'd never been good at giving myself. The next day, I went to the hives, the air crisp with the first real bite of fall. I watched the bees, their wings catching the morning light, and thought about what Rosemary had said. Healing. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew I couldn't keep living in this limbo, caught between love and betrayal. The bees had taught me something. You can't force a hive to thrive by holding on to what's broken. Sometimes you have to let go, clear out the wreckage, and start again. I wasn't ready to forgive her, and I didn't know if I ever would be. But I was starting to see that holding on to the pain was killing me as much as her betrayal had. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something like hope. Not for us, but for me. Maybe I could rebuild, like the bees, one small step at a time. The Vermont winter was creeping in, the meadow dusted with frost that sparkled under the weak November sun. I'd always loved this time of year, the way the hives quieted, the bees clustering tight to keep their queen warm. It was a time for rest, for preparing for spring, when the world would hum again. But this year, the quiet felt different, like it was echoing the stillness in me. I'd been tending the hives daily, wrapping them in insulation, checking their stores. The work was grounding, a reminder that I could still build something, even if it was just a safe winter for my bees. Rosemary and I had reached a breaking point. After her talk about leaving, we couldn't keep dancing around the truth. One evening, as the wind rattled the farmhouse windows, we sat down again. The kitchen was dim, lit only by a single bulb above the table. She looked older, her face lined with the weight of our unraveling. "Calvin," she said, her voice steady but soft, "I'm going to Burlington tomorrow. I've packed a bag. I think it's best if I stay with my sister for a while." I nodded, my throat tight. I'd spent weeks wrestling with what I wanted, her gone, her staying, some impossible version of forgiveness. But sitting there, I realized I didn't want to keep living in this half-life, where every glance was a reminder of her betrayal. "How long?" I asked. She shrugged, her eyes on the table. "I don't know. Long enough for you to figure out what you need." I wanted to ask if she'd see Dale, if that was part of her plan. But I didn't. It didn't matter anymore. Dale was gone from my life, and Rosemary was choosing to leave. Maybe that was the closest I'd get to closure. She left the next morning, her car packed with a suitcase and a few boxes. I watched from the porch, the cold biting my hands. As her taillights disappeared down the road, the farmhouse felt emptier without her, but also lighter, like I could finally breathe. I didn't know if we'd divorce or if we'd ever find a way to talk again. All I knew was that I needed to find myself again, not the Calvin who'd trusted blindly, but someone new, someone who could survive this. The bees helped. I threw myself into preparing the hives for winter, stacking straw bales around them to block the wind, checking ventilation to prevent mold. One afternoon, I found a hive with a weak queen. Her brood pattern spotty. I could have left it. Let nature take its course, but I didn't. I ordered a new queen from a supplier, a small act of hope that felt bigger than it was. The bees were teaching me something I'd forgotten. You don't rebuild by holding on to what's broken. You start over, one careful step at a time. The town noticed the change. Mrs. Larson at the general store stopped me one day, her eyes softer than before. "Got some honey coming this spring, Calvin?" she asked. I managed a smile, the first real one in months. "Working on it," I said. I started going to the market again, selling the last of the fall harvest. People asked about Rosemary, and I'd just say she was visiting family. The gossip had died down, or maybe I just stopped caring. My sister, Ellen, became my anchor. She'd come by with coffee or a pie, never pushing too hard, but always there. One night, over a slice of her apple crumble, she asked, "You gonna be okay, Cal?" I thought about it, really thought, and nodded. "Not yet," I said, "but I will be." She squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I didn't pull away. As winter settled in, I sat by the hives one evening, the air sharp and still. The bees were quiet, tucked away in their clusters, surviving. I realized I was surviving too. Rosemary's betrayal had shattered me, but it hadn't ended me. I'd spent years believing trust was like a hive, steady, predictable, built to last. But trust could break, and so could I. The difference was, I could rebuild, not the same life, not the same Calvin, but something new. The bees would hum again in spring, and maybe, just maybe, I'd find a way to hum along with them.